Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our media availability with Subra Suresh, the director of the National Science Foundation. He'll say a few words, and then we'll be available to take questions from the media.
So I'll just take a couple of minutes or so to tell you a little bit about NSF. I'm sure you know, but just for completeness, a few items about NSF, and then we have about 25 minutes or so for questions and discussion, and we'll leave it there. So NSF started in 1950. Our annual budget is currently a little north of $7 billion. Our mandate is to support all fields of science and engineering, including social, behavioral, and economic sciences. And last year we funded about 300,000 individuals in 2,000 institutions around the country. So our support is not only for universities and colleges, not only for research, but also for related STEM education. So we are not in charge of education, because that's the Department of Education at the K through 12 level, but we fund best practices, research into education in STEM at universities and colleges, sometimes science museums, NOVA program, etc., etc. We have, in addition to sponsoring research, we have activities that promote unique research. For example, and the National Science Foundation is the point agency for the entire US for the continent of Antarctica. And that involves 50 countries. And we coordinate logistics and science. And the logistics costs are significantly greater than the cost of science because of the extreme remote location of the continent. But the remote location is also ideal for new and unique science in many different fields, and that we support. Same in the Arctic. And also facilities across the world in seismology, working with many countries. So we have science for diplomacy and diplomacy for science, both sides. In Antarctica, we deal with 50 countries. In the area of seismology, we deal with 80 countries through an NSF-funded center called IRIS. Arctic, we have 15 countries involved. We have a lot of partnerships, increasingly, and we have offices in different countries. So NSF has an office in Beijing, in Tokyo, and in Paris. And we have a small facility or a small office in Christchurch in New Zealand as a point of entry into Antarctica. We also have a small office in the southern tip of Chile in a town called Punta Arenas, from which we can go to Antarctica as well. So let me stop there as just sort of a broad introduction, and you may have specific questions.
Hello, Dr. Suresh. Randy Shostak, reporter with EOS at AGU. NSF recently announced that Dr. Roger Wakimoto will be the next GEO-AD at NSF. And I wonder, could you talk about A, the process of getting the new AD and the situation with convincing people to rotate to NSF positions in general? And B, what in particular prompted you and NSF to encourage and select Dr. Wakimoto as the new AD? Okay.
The process we engage in to select a GEO-AD is no different from the process we engage in to select any AD for any directorate. It's a well-established process. So before I go to that, let me just give a little bit of a background to this process so that you can appreciate where we are coming from, where we have come from historically. NSF is the only federal agency that doesn't do any internal research. US Geological Survey, NOAA, NASA, Department of Energy, NIST, they all do internal research. They all have scientists in-house who do research full-time. Unlike them, NSF receives money from Congress. We give all the money out back minus the cost of operations, which is only less than 6%. So because of that, because we don't have any internal research, we have to keep at the cutting edge of science. So how do you do that when your internal staff don't do any research and have no mechanism to do research? One way NSF has done, probably more so than other agencies, is what we call IPAs, interpersonal agreements. So people from the outside come to NSF for some short period of time, typically 2 to 4 years. In the case of, same with program officers, so we have a little more than 400 program officers. Half of them are IPAs. They are mostly professors, but not all. Scientists from outside of NSF who come to NSF for a short period of time as rotators and then go back to wherever they came from. It's also convenient from a logistical point of view in the sense that they are not federal employees. They are employees of the institutions from which they come to NSF. NSF pays those institutions, so we don't engage in. So this way, their lives are not disrupted. Their lives are disrupted by moving, but this way, their salaries are not disrupted. Let me say, and the arrangements are relatively simple. So that's the overall background to this. So I'm not an IPA as a presidential appointee. I cannot be, but I come from a university as well for a finite period of time, and so this is not I'm a federal employee, but this is not my permanent calling. And so this will, I will go back to something else after this. So that's how NSF has historically operated. To specifically go back to Roger Wakimoto, so the way we do this process is the deputy director and I appoint a search advisory committee, which is mainly people from the community, experts from the community, in this case the geosciences community. Plus we seek input from the advisory committee to the Geo Directorate of experts. These are university professors and scientists. We ask them who should be on this committee. We also ask them, can you recommend names of people who you want to recommend for this job? We also ask them, if you are interested in this job, let us know, because we would like to attract you to come. And I also tell them, as a matter of normal procedure, even if you think you are not interested in it, and you get on the committee, at any point your opinion changes, let me know. We'll get you off the committee so you can be a candidate as well. So we continue this process. The external committee goes through the applications, but they don't interview them. They go through they call colleagues, they get input, and they make a short list, and we have the full list as well, those who made it into the short list and those who didn't. That comes to us, and then we invite candidates to come. And they meet with the entire senior leadership. Because of the confidentiality, we can't have them meet with everybody at NSF, so they meet with a relatively small group of senior leadership team, and we interview them, and then we also get references from the community very discreetly, and then we decide. And there are constraints in many cases, dual career families and relocating, health issues, all kinds of things, financial issues, etc. So we have to balance all of this, and we were really delighted that Roger Wakimoto surfaced as a candidate, and he expressed an interest, and he was very enthusiastically endorsed and chosen by the senior leadership team, and we were delighted that he accepted.
Other questions?
I'm Liz O'Connell, frontierscientist.com. I work with UAF. And my question is, are you happy with the media that goes out to the general public? Do you feel that the general public is getting sufficiently educated about NSF and the wonderful research that's being done by scientists?
I think, let me answer broadly without any specific cases. we all wish that there was a greater appreciation of science in the community at large, and we could use more of that at all levels, from the public to the print media to electronic media to television. The importance of science, compared to some of our strong competitors around the world, we probably get less attention in the US to information about science compared to some other countries. We could always use more help, and especially conveying the excitement of science to policymakers. We have a lot of activities, and we get a lot of help from professional societies, from media, from universities, and so forth. But we could use a lot more help. And conversely, if there is something that NSF could do to do more of this, we cannot lobby. And being a science funding agency, there is a certain amount of reticence or reluctance, whatever you want to call it, in talking about the accomplishments of what NSF does. And while that's admirable from one perspective, it can be detrimental from a different perspective. So that's the fine line we need to walk. And the other issue related to your question is that doing a major breakthrough in mathematics or solving something in biology, which doesn't necessarily cure cancer or send man to the moon or something like this, doesn't catch the attention of the public as easily. So that's something that's a challenge for the National Science Foundation. I don't know if I answer your question. I'm happy with a lot of the coverage, but I feel that sometimes I feel that there is something really exciting happens that NSF funds. My immediate reaction is, why is this not on the front page of the New York Times? So, yeah.
At a recent House Science Committee hearing on polar research, if my memory is correct, you'd mentioned that NSF would issue a point-by-point response to the Blue Ribbon Commission at the recent National Science Board meeting. So I'm wondering, I gather that I don't know if that was or was not issued. I'm gathering it wasn't, but can you just update me on that situation?
Great. So I don't remember my exact words, but you're right. So right after the Blue Ribbon panel released their report in July of this year, we formed an internal, what we call a tiger team, to look at the response to that report. So, of course, things that pertain to safety and so forth, we want to act immediately. So what do we need to do right now? Are there issues? The program has operated extremely safely for decades. But if there are any potential points of failure, we want to address that. The second is long range. The Polar program is very important to NSF and to the country. How do we make sure that we position that in the most appropriate way? Of course, the Blue Ribbon Panel report is very helpful. The last time the Blue Ribbon Panel released a report about 15, 16 years ago, that led to the construction and completion of a new station in the South Pole, the Scott Amundsen station in the South Pole. So the Blue Ribbon Panel report of very distinguished colleagues is very helpful to us, and we want to use that as sort of a catalyst for us to move forward very quickly. That's why I had a very tight timeline for us to act. We were not intending to release a public report point by point, because some of the issues are procurement sensitive. I cannot talk about them in public. So this is mostly an internal working group. And there was a National Science Board meeting yesterday and day before yesterday. The head of our polar programs gave a presentation to the National Science Board on some of the high-level issue in an open session. And she talked about, Dr. Kelly Faulkner, she talked about how NSF would respond and what we have already responded to, what we are responding, and how we will work with the contractor and internally within NSF.
Dr. Suresh, my name is Mary Miller from the Exploratorium, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the concept of one NSF and broader impacts, and specifically your vision about how scientists themselves can be more involved in education and public outreach, how you see that that moving forward.
Okay. So those two can be related, but let me start separately between one NSF and broader impacts, and then try to connect the two. The notion of one NSF is it's more philosophical than operational. So what do I mean by this? I'll give you one concrete example of this on collectively what we can do that individually we cannot do. So let me first start with the philosophical thought of this. NSF has only one mission and one broad vision, but within NSF we fund every field of science and engineering. So the mathematicians and the physicists and the chemists and the engineers and the geoscientists, they deal with specific communities, and each community is a scientific community, but their needs are very different. Their sphere of influence in the society is different, and therefore their own perceptions of their impact on the society is somewhat different. So you see that from my vantage point. I see this much better than I was able to see 2 years ago. And so given that, the idea behind one NSF is if we can take some of the best practices that may be hidden in one corner of NSF and elevate it to all of NSF, we can have a much bigger impact than we can have individually. This goes directly to broadening participation. It also is an example from our Geo Directorate. So the Geo Directorate had a mechanism to fund a postdoc program, especially pertaining to women. And it was inside the directorate, and it has been going on for some time. A very good practice. When I first found out about it, I was actually quite excited about this. But it's very difficult for any directorate at NSF, including the Geo Directorate, to take its practice and then go beyond its boundaries or its community, because that's not what the directorate does typically. So what we did was we actually stole the idea, or I stole the idea from the Geo Directorate, with their permission, I should say, and elevated it to all NSF. So the example I'm referring to is something called the Career Life Balance Initiative. Well, the goal of that, again, that goes back to broadening participation, because women come in increasingly into the PhD level STEM workforce, but they don't stay there. It would have been very difficult for any Geo assistant director to bring that one program embedded inside Geo to the attention of the White House and to get the President or the First Lady to be excited about it. So I took that and said, this is important for all of NSF, not for Geo. Went and talked to the First Lady's Chief of Staff. And they were very excited, so we launched an initiative called the Career Life Balance Initiative in the East Room of the White House in September of last year, with the First Lady announcing it. And that really brought attention nationwide and internationally. Last week, at the European Parliament, there was a gender summit, and they talked about NSF's Career Life Balance Initiative, and I recorded a video. I couldn't go there, so I sent a video message to them. It was played in the European Parliament. So that's the example of a very clear example of one NSF, of how you can take something inside NSF and have a much broader reach. Let me quickly give you another example in a completely different area. We have an Office of International Science and Engineering, which deals with NSF's engagement internationally. It has an annual budget of about $50 million. But that office is relatively small compared to the size of NSF, both in dollars and in terms of the number of people. And so recently we organized a gathering at NSF of my peers from 47 countries. And I pretty much, they did all the hard work, they organized it, but it was organized under my signature as an NSF effort, not an Office of International Science and Engineering effort. We engaged the White House, we engaged the State Department. If it was organized as an Office of International Science and Engineering effort, we would not have been able to get 47 heads of research funding agencies from 47 countries to come to NSF at their own expense. By bringing the Office of the Director, Dr. John Holdren, the State Department, NSF-wide, we were able to bring. Plus, we tapped into the expertise of all of NSF in different corners. So that's another example of one NSF. Please.
James Beal, I'm a freelance science writer. Just want to ask if one of the purposes of NSF is to train young scientists, to support laboratories, to keep them current, or rather than just the end result of science?
Yeah, so one of the things we've done historically is something called, we play a role, not in terms of, historically we played a role not in terms of quantitative targets, in terms of how many people we should produce, how many teachers we should produce. That's not our mandate. But we contribute to that enterprise in a very significant way. So let me give you a couple of examples of this. Yesterday we had a big celebration at NSF for this. So this year is the 60th anniversary. So NSF is 62 years old. It was founded in 1950. In 1952, we started a program called the Graduate Research Fellowship Program, GRF. So yesterday we had the celebration at NSF for this. In 60 years, we have supported 46,500 graduate research fellows. So each year we would fund a certain number of students. We give them money for tuition and for living expenses, not all of it, but most of it. And what is the benefit of it to the student? The benefit is that usually when a student decides to go to a graduate school, he or she doesn't, it takes some time to decide what area they want to work for a PhD thesis. It takes time. They don't know who to work for. There are 10 professors in the department. They have to pick one professor. Oftentimes they pick the professor who has the money to support them, not necessarily the professor with whom they want to work or in the field in which they want to work. So what the NSF fellowship does is give them the money, gives the individual the money. They don't even have to go to that university. They get admitted in two universities. They can choose which university they want to go to, and they can take the fellowship to that university that they choose to go to. So this is something we have done. And in the last 2 years, we have increased the number of fellowships abruptly from 1,000 to 2,000 per year. And we made a conscious decision, no matter what the budget constraints are, that we will support this as much as possible, even in this economic climate, because it's so important to the future of the country. Let me now give you the impact of this. So the current director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy and the science advisor to the president, Dr. John Holdren, the current chairman of the Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke, the recent economic advisor to the president, Larry Summers, the co-founder of Google, Sergey Brin, they are all recipients decades ago of NSF fellowship. Secretary Stephen Chu, he came and spoke yesterday at the event. The president of University of Chicago, Bob Zimmer, he was given a fellowship to do his PhD in mathematics by NSF. He came and spoke yesterday. So this is something that we are committed to. And we also do that not just for graduate students, we do it for young faculty. So I had one of NSF's 5-year Young Faculty Awards when I was young, and I was actually doing real science. And that helped me get my tenure at Brown University. So I think NSF has done a lot of this over a period of time.
So we have time for one more question, just 2 minutes, and then we have to clear the room for the next press conference.
With the potential looming fiscal cliff with an 8.2% across-the-board cut, what specific contingencies have NSF made, in particular related to GEO?
Well, so we have a lot of internal, we always look at scenarios, not just for fiscal cliff. Even historically, every year, we ask for a budget. The president asks for a budget for NSF, and we send a proposal to OMB. It's a long process, as you know. And we don't, we plan for scenarios. What if we get an increase? What if we get a decrease? So we have a lot of what if scenarios, optimistic scenarios, pessimistic scenarios. And some of them play out across the board. Some of them play out individually, because some are based on principles. The example that I gave about graduate fellowships no matter where it's cut, we're not going to cut graduate fellows, young people. So things like this. Some are related to facility. Even within GEO, it could be facilities versus individual scholarship. So we have a lot of scenarios, but until we cross the bridge, we cannot say that this will be a scenario. Hopefully, we'll see. But we will go through this no matter what the scenario is.
Well, thank you so much for your participation. And our next press conference will start in 4 minutes on the L'Aquila earthquake.